Good morning, everyone. I remember I was once officiating at a wedding, and the photographer mic'd me up because he wanted to capture every word. So he put on my lapel a little mic, and into my pocket the little battery-operated receptor. And I officiated the wedding. And after the wedding, Mazel Tov, the groom broke the glass. I went back to interacting with everyone at the wedding. And then, like 20 minutes into the reception, the photographer comes up to me and says, "Oh, Rabbi, I need to get your mic back." And I realized that I was walking around the whole time with the mic on my lapel. And the first thought that came to my mind is, what did I say in the last 20 minutes that was captured on the mic? Well, in this week's Torah portion, we have the story of Miriam and Aaron having a conversation about their brother Moses, how he separated from his wife. And they were speaking Lashon Hara, negative words about their brother. And God comes to them and reprimands them. When the Torah says how Miriam said to her brother Aaron, "Why did Moses separate from his wife?" Yes, he's a prophet, but we're also prophets. The verse ends with two words, Vayishma Hashem, and God heard. And those two words are such a powerful lesson. God hears every conversation. We're all constantly mic'd up. And we should always be careful about what words we're saying because they're all being recorded. But the truth is they're not only being recorded by God, they're being recorded by others. How often do you say something to someone in a positive way, and years later they say, "You remember what you told me when I was going through that situation?" And you don't remember necessarily. But to them those words were very meaningful, and they carry it with them for years and years and years. And so we have to realize not only is God listening to every word, but the people we speak to are going to remember those words if they're good. But unfortunately, they'll also remember them if they're negative. Sometimes you could throw a comment or say something, and you forget about it 5 minutes later. But the hurt and the pain could be carried with that person for a very long time. And therefore, the two words of Vayishma Hashem, God is listening, and also your fellow man is listening as well. There's a story told by this fellow. He says when he was 10 years old, he was a kid in school and he couldn't sit still. He was very ADD. And so he had this wonderful teacher one year who realized that he couldn't sit still. So whenever the teacher saw he's getting fidgety and he can't contain himself, the teacher would give him an assignment. Could you go get chalk for the blackboard? Could you go get me an eraser? Could you go deliver these papers to the principal's office? So he loved it because he always had an outlet to get up and go around. One day his teacher doesn't show up. The principal comes in and says, "Unfortunately, your teacher has to have a surgery and he's going to be out for a while, and here is the new principal. Here's the new teacher, the substitute teacher." And this Shmuley, his name was, says the minute he saw that teacher, he knew it was going to be trouble because he had a very stern look on his face. And sure enough, he was a very harsh individual. And he would reprimand Shmuley for not sitting still and not focusing and not attention, and he would embarrass him in front of the class and say, everyone in this class has to use their head, you have to focus, you have to concentrate. And he nicknamed him Shmuley the Springer, Shmuley the Spring, because he can't sit still. And this poor kid started to shrivel up. One day he was making a paper airplane, and the teacher came up to him and grabbed it out of his hand and crunched it in his hand and squashed it and said, "Go to the principal's office." And he was once again punished. And then finally his parents were called to a meeting. And at this meeting, the rabbi, the substitute teacher, says to the parents, "Your son is not learning, he's not paying attention, he's not focusing, and everyone has to use their head in my class." And Shmuley's father tried to defend him and say, but he has other good qualities. And the teacher said, "I don't care. If he doesn't use his head and learn, he's going to be a nothing. And poor Shmuley was so humiliated. He was destroyed. And he carried that pain of those words. You're going to be a nothing. You're going to be a nothing. Well, thank God his teacher recovered and came back a few months later. 20 years later, Shmuley went on to get married and start a family. And sure enough, he was good with his hands. He became an electrician. But he also decided to volunteer for an organization called Hatzalah, which are emergency first responders, volunteer paramedics. And one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, he gets a call. And he goes rushing to the home, and he sees the light on. They open the door, he runs upstairs, he sees a woman crying, her husband is laid out flat on the floor, he had a heart attack. He starts to work on him and try to revive him, takes his pulse, he doesn't have a pulse, he gets the defibrillator, and sure enough, he doesn't give up, and sure enough, he's able to get his heartbeat back, and he's rushed with the ambulance to the hospital. A month later, he gets a call from the grandson of this man. He says, "You saved my grandfather's life. We're having a big family celebration to thank God. We'd like you to come and be the guest of honor." Shmuley arrives. He walks in and he's introduced to the man. He saved his life at the head of the table. And he looks at this rabbi and he recognizes him. It was his substitute teacher. And the man hugs him and kisses him and thanks him. And he says, "Could I have a word with you?" Takes him into a side room and Shmuley says, "Do you remember me?" He says, "No." He says, "I was in your class when I was 10 years old. You were my substitute teacher." And he reminds him of what he said to him in the office. He said, "In front of my parents, you said, if you don't use your head, you're going to be a nothing, a nothing." And he says, "I still carry the hurt of those words." The rabbi started to cry. He says, "I feel so terrible. Please, please forgive me." He kept on asking for forgiveness. And finally he said, "Please come back into the living room with me." He quieted everyone down and told the whole story and publicly asked for forgiveness from Shmuley. And then he said, when he was a little boy, I said if he doesn't use his head, he's going to be a nothing. But what I didn't realize was that he was going to use his heart to save my life. Every person is a child of God. Every person has their purpose and their mission in this world. And even if you don't understand or don't appreciate someone else, remember that they're made in God's image. They may not be in your image, but they're in God's image. And therefore, only say positive words, never something negative. Because Vayishma Hashem, God is always listening. And equally important, your fellow man is listening and will carry those words. Have a wonderful day.